Alright, welcome back to episode 2 of the Permaculture Chat. So, let's see, where did we stop off exactly? So anyway, I'm working off of raised garden beds primarily, and that's because the soil here, for one, it's compacted beyond belief. You know, all lawn is compacted soil, which, just compacted soil is, the enemy of all things natural growth. Root structures need to have space to move underground, and it also needs to be an aerobic environment. So soil has different levels, and it has different bacteria that exist in those levels. And towards the top you'll have your aerobic bacteria, which means they need oxygen, and below that you'll have anaerobic bacteria, which means they hate oxygen. And the issue is, when you have compacted soil, is you're lacking all of your aerobic species, and the entire substrate is an anaerobic environment. And there's techniques such as broad forking that resolve this. And I mean, I'm not going to broad fork my backyard, because you just probably end up breaking some kind of wire or pipe that belongs to the city and get in trouble. But that is an alternative to plowing is like the single most detrimental thing you can do to soil. However, plowing and tilling also creates an aerobic environment. Now the downside is it upturns this, so you'll never have a stable ecosystem in your soil, which your soil it's like a universe in itself. It's a self-sustaining ecosystem. It probably doesn't know what we're doing up here and doesn't care, because it's figured things out in its little zone underground. And when you plow or till, you take the lower levels, those anaerobic bacteria, and you force them to the top, and you force the aerobic bacteria to the bottom, and so they die off, and they reach a new equilibrium, and then it's plowed or tilled again, and they die off. And it's just a process that nature only has so much patience, I guess, for us, and tilling and plowing is a great way to test that patience. So that is why I work off of raised beds. The soil in a backyard is just really not practical. And that also gives me more say over what's in the soil. Like, I can't attest to what was done. I think we've lived here for maybe 3.5 or 4 years, and I can't attest to what was done before we got here. They could have poured like insane toxic chemicals. There's no telling. And it's just things that I wouldn't want to ingest. So I like having the control over all the inputs that go into my planting soil by creating it myself. And so, but yeah, the permaculture it's a very handy concept that I'm trying to scale down to applicable to my situation within the confines of the context that I operate within, which is raised beds in an urban backyard. But on the broader scale, see, one of the tenets of permaculture is to operate within nature's framework, and nature abhors a monocrop or a monoculture. And when you look at a industrial field of produce, you're looking at row upon row of mile upon mile of the exact same species. And this causes what would otherwise be a very diverse soil microbiome to be very restricted. And these root systems penetrate to different levels, and they release different nutrients into the soil, and different microbial species thrive on them. And when we take that away and place a monoculture of the same plant over and over and over, that's robbing the soil of its potential. And that well, it's just not a ideal thing to do. So permaculture gardening practices focus on interspeciation, which, if you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of interspeciated cropping area. And that is just combining things, mixing different plants that complement each other. Now, you don't want a lot of plants that need the same ratios of the same nutrients and have the same root structure, because if they're all shallow root plants, they're all going to be competing for the same nutrient base at the same level. But when you combine like a tap-rooted perennial with a light-rooted annual, then you're complementing both of the soil layers, which is beneficial to everything really. And including perennials with annuals is also a really vital aspect of this. And if you don't know, perennials they produce every year. Annuals, they live for 1 year, they seed and they die. And the thing with perennials is they operate on a philosophy of having to survive in that place, so they don't do anything to their environment that's going to compromise their ability to prevail. Annual plant, they're not overly concerned with anything, because they just vacuum up all the nutrients out of the soil, they give nothing back, and then they die, and they're indifferent to the concept. The perennial forms this symbiotic relationships with the soil and the microbiome and the fungal mycorrhizal structures that net off of the roots. Because when you pull a plant and you're looking at the roots, that's actually not the entire structure. It's a very interesting thing. And you could even Google fungal mycorrhizae images, and there's these nets of microscopic fungi that attach to the roots and then grow outward from them. And it's just this like elaborate web of just ingenious symbiosis, because the plant gives these mycorrhizal fungi what they need to survive, and in return the mycorrhizal fungi have byproducts which the plant needs to survive. And this isn't like a designed thing, like they didn't sit in a room and come up with this plan. It's just something that nature worked out throughout the eons, and it's very effective. And so working within that structure is, it's the ultimate way to set up a sustainable arrangement, where the idea is you don't want your garden or your farm to be reliant on synthetic inputs, because as we learned with the conflict in Eastern Europe and the subsequent fertilizer shortage, that's not a guarantee. Things can happen that derail that little arrangement. So you want your production, your garden location, to be self-sustaining to the point that you can provide everything it needs. Now you're still going to have to compost things, because that's just that's how you fertilize soil. It naturally loses fertility over time just through evaporation, and there is a permeability between the open atmosphere and soil, so things do dissipate. But the idea is to restrict that with the use of cover cropping, and supplement its reuptake by using compost, which it's free, and it's awesome. That's what better way to deal with grass clippings and scraps, produce scraps from eating, than to turn it into compost that'll feed your next crop. It's really cool, I think. But yeah, that is the concept of permaculture, and I thought I would go on that little side tangent to avoid mourning and about the gloom and doom of droughts and heat waves, which, I mean, that's a legitimate problem right now. But instead of dwelling on that and, sitting here saying, "Oh me," I thought it would be better to just talk about, just pathways to a brighter future, I guess. And this is small scale, large scale. The cool thing about permaculture is there's no size restriction. It can be done on a massive scale. It can be done in your backyard. It can be done if you're in an apartment or a townhouse and all you have is a second floor balcony that's like 3 feet by 5 feet, which we used to have. You can have, a produce growing just facility right there that is fully sustainable and operates off of regenerative concepts. There is no limits to what can be done with this practice. So the biggest thing I would encourage people to do is not listen to this and, look at like my backyard and be like, "Oh, I don't have a backyard. I have, I'm on the 3rd floor and I just have this like little bitty cube that I can step out on for fresh air." Well, make the most of that little bitty cube and utilize vertical space. Vertical space is the most underutilized asset in all of produce growing, and especially in urban environments. And in fact, Bill Mollison had a really awesome place that he created, which it was a fully sustainable, and I'm talking lush and diverse garden on a tiny balcony. And it's really cool what can be done as long as you don't allow yourself to get stuck in that mindset of, "I don't have what this person talking about this has, therefore this isn't for me and I'm not even going to try." Because if that was the case, I mean, I could just as easily have said, "Well, I don't have a 100-acre farm, so it's never going to work." But, my wife and I wanted to buy farmland. It wasn't in the cards with the chaos of, land prices post-COVID. So we decided to make the most of what we had, and that's the key to it, is instead of dwelling on what you don't have and how much better things would be if you did have that, is to focus on what you do have and what it can become. And things grow, you never know what tomorrow will be like. You could easily find yourself on a piece of land, and then you'll already have that experience and that knowledge already instilled. So the learning curve will have already been overcome, because there is a learning curve when it comes to growing produce and fruit. It's anyone that thinks you plant it, you water it, and then you pick it, and that's it. It's significantly oversimplifying the concept. So yeah, so y'all have a good day, and we'll catch you on the flip side. And good night from the Regenerative Urban Farm. I hope you gained something from this video.